Hey everyone, before we get into another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, I need to give a quick shout out to some of the supporters of the podcast, the first of which is the Archives of Falconry. And if any of you are a member of the Archives, thank you very much. But if not, I strongly encourage you to join. I know I did, and I've been really happy with my membership. Memberships help support the world's leading falconry heritage organization, and you can find more information under the support tab at falconry.org, but some of the benefits of the membership include discounted or free rendezvous tickets, discounts at their online store, updates on book auctions, and sneak peeks at new exhibits, and cool swag amongst other things. So, like I said, if you're interested and you haven't become a member yet, I highly recommend you do so. Just head to falconry.org. And by now, most of you are probably aware that I'm a big fan of the products that Baba Yaga Crafts out of Poland makes, whether it's the hybrid jesses, which change from muse to field by one twist of the swivel slit, or 100% hand-sewn made-to-measure gloves, or of course the anklets that he makes with the easy twist nut sewn into it. I like all the stuff that he makes. So if you've never tried any of his products, now is a good time, because as of right now anyway, if you message him and mention the word Chronicles or the Falconry Chronicles podcast, you'll get free shipping out of Poland, which is a nice little chunk of change. So hit him up, send him a message on Instagram at Baba Yaga Goshawk or at the email address that's on our website, and get you some really nice, handmade, good quality equipment. You won't regret it. And of course, I also have to mention onX. If you are not a current subscriber to the onX app, you're missing out on a lot of really cool benefits that can really add to your hunting experience. I know I'm really fond of using the app to track all of my hunting locations, and occasionally even use it to hit up people and scout in advance for some new spots and try and gain access to land and things like that. It's really handy for a lot of different things. So if you're not a current subscriber, head to onxmaps.com, enter the promo code HXP20 at checkout, and start knowing where you stand with onX. Now, on to the next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
They hit the ground, you stop, you walk up, untie it, tie it to your bag, drop the bag, let them have the lure, settle down, and they learn to grapple. Every bird I've ever done this with has never lost the first thing they ever caught. Never. They have clamps, man. They know to clamp. And took that bird out on opening day, put it up. I drove not a quarter of a mile. I didn't know, without being in the same field all the time, I didn't know how he'd respond, but he followed the truck. There's a habit. And by the time I got out of the truck to flush the ducks, he's like 700 feet higher than he ever went to the kite. We flushed the ducks, he killed a duck on his first flight.
Hey everyone, as always, welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and the Canada series that I put together for you all that's been ongoing for a while. Believe it or not, we're down to our last couple episodes with that. Hopefully in the future I'll get a chance to record some more episodes with some falconers from Canada, hopefully even in person, we'll see. But Dale Guthormsen is our guest for this episode, and Dale is a very well-traveled and very experienced falconer from Canada. Has been around for a long time. There's lots of really cool stuff that's discussed in this episode, and he talks about some different training techniques with longwings and lots of different odds and ends type stuff. I think you'll find this episode pretty informative as well as entertaining, and like I said, I hope you've really enjoyed this Canada series, and hopefully I'll have some more for you in the future. But as of right now, we will jump into this episode with Dale and enjoy. Here we go. So you were just at the range? Is that what you said?
Yeah. A buddy and I built a range out here. We can shoot out to 1,350 yards. So when the weather finally breaks like it has, we're out there every morning. Well, we're shooting 973 yards today, but we're kind of out of practice. It's been such a long winter this year. It was terrible. We really had 6.5 months of snow.
I was just talking to Lynn, and he said, he was telling me pretty much the same thing. So that sounds pretty miserable to me.
Yeah, they actually get a little more snow as a rule up there than we do. They're quite often, they're shut out in November. Their hawk and goes, and November comes, they can't get in the fields. Let's put it this way. They're not going to go to the trouble to get the vehicles right so they can get in those fields, so they just call it the end of a season. Me, I'm too obsessed to give up until it's really unbearable. Like this year is the third season in 43 years here in Mossbank that I had to end my season early, I quit on December 15th. And it wasn't that I couldn't drive in the fields because it was so windy that the snow was blowing off all the level prairie ground, but there was drifts everywhere. And flying a fresh new gerfalcon, I got this bird. It's a box bird, raised in a chamber and left there until I got it mid-October and started training it. And we had a pretty good run at it, and I was flying my old bird, Jake, in his 8th season, a little hybrid Tiercel. But a female ger, fresh, flying grouse in, December. Like, the female gers, they'll chase forever. And, a baby bird like that has no experience. If it goes and chases one 3 miles, and that's pretty easy to do here. I've actually had kills that far off. I couldn't follow up, even though you can drive most fields. You got drifts everywhere preventing you to get through to the next place or to enter a field or whatever. And besides that, December here in Mossbank, it was minus 30, 28 to minus 30 every day, with winds taking it up to minus 48 out in the open air where you're hawking. And, I was just finishing the kite and doing all that. I hate that training stuff with a passion. And then to have to do it in bad weather on top. I just thought, I'll be flying grouse by the end of December after a little bit of prep work and running the risk of losing a really nice bird. And she's really nice. I like her. And I thought, I'm just not going to do it. It just hurts too much. Like, I've had 4 operations on my hands and 1 on my shoulder and all this stuff just from wearing myself out. And I get cold easily. Now, this hand here, I had you can see the scar all the way down across here. I have no feeling in this part because all the vessels and tendons were all cut when a car accident. And so I don't have circulation to my fingers and stuff because all these top blood vessels were just sheared right off. They had to put a tourniquet on me to keep me from bleeding out. That's how bad it was. If I was anywhere but where I was, I would have never made it to a hospital. So someone was looking over me that day. And my wife didn't even, she had a scratch on her wrist, But anyhow, it was bad. We did a triple end over end. My dogs were in crates throwing all the toppers gone. It was terrible. But anyway, and I wasn't even hawking. I was just coming back from visiting my falconry buddy Nairn up in Saskatoon. Anyhow, so it was a short season, but that happens, I live where there's lots of game if you work hard. But there are things that go with that. It's hard work.
For me, the trade-off, I don't know if it would be worth it.
Most people, it's really not, and I understand that. Like, if you don't have the game, to have birds fly the way I like to see them fly, they got to kill something 3 or 4 times a week, or their whole level comes down. Let's face it, it's just what it is. Confidence builds everything. Mike Connolly was a really close friend of mine way back, 69, 70. And we went hawking. One time he said something that was really quite brilliant. He said, when you got a falcon that's not flying with confidence, all you really have is a bird just flying around. And that is totally the truth. If they don't have confidence, they're just up there flying around. And if they get lucky, they get something. I don't operate on that level. I go out every day and intend to kill something every day or more, whether I have 1 bird or 2 birds. I catch the same amount of game, whether I'm flying 1 hawk or 2 hawks. I've tried 3 a few times. I always end up giving 1 away, so I don't do that. Now I'm kind of down to wanting to just fly 1. And then a year ago from last December, my 6-year-old grouse hawk, just a star. Hit a grouse so hard it ruptured its liver and heart. End of story, and had no hawk to fly the rest of the season. So, yeah, I don't like the spare hawk idea, but if you're going to have two, you got to fly them hard to make sure they both get what they deserve.
Yeah, I've got a couple buddies that do the same thing with red tails and squirrels. They'll have one that they try and intermute at least one season, and in the meantime, they'll trap another juvie just in case, so one gets bit too bad or whatever the case.
And you might get the one special bird too. If you fly one bird for 12 years, there's something that goes with that, and that is the good is the greatest detriment to the great. You got a good bird, you're not going to get rid of it. You're going to keep flying that good bird, but you're never going to see great unless you go after it. And that, since I was young, that's all I went after, to see them on the extreme. I actually, 1970, I think it was, Mike Arnold and John Szabo were out flying a pair of IS Tiercel Peels. And John flew his like off the chart wild, and I thought that's really good, but you're not going to, it was pre-telemetry era, you're not going to keep birds long, for the most part. And Mike's bird didn't fly it so liberal, you might say. And it was a lot better, flew really nice and stuff. And I still thought, well, it could still be a little more and still be in some kind of control. And in 73, I finally had the first one that I consider a truly great falcon. Flew so high, we went up hawking in Idaho in the winter. And Steve Sanders, another Californian that lived up in Idaho hawking, he had the brother to mine. And every day we go out, and one guy manned the 10-power binoculars, and you would fly your hawk. It didn't matter which one of us, because both birds were flying the same, and which is a good argument for great genetics, by the way. Anyhow, and so we'd sit there, and they, like Steve would have the binoculars on his bird. I couldn't see the bird, and it was just a speck in the 10-power binoculars. And he'd say, "Yeah, she's kind of coming this way, And that bird would key on us, and we'd go flush pheasants and stuff out in the big Idaho plains up there. And it was the first truly great one I had. Lost her, and then she was actually stolen, unfortunately. But then I had another bird, a peregrine, and in her second year, that bird just was another great one, spectacled out and stuff, and was terrific, we're in the New Mexico deserts way back then, and that bird, we flew ducks 44 times. I was living on White Sands Missile Range at the time, and my wife was the meteorologist there. And that bird killed 43 ducks in 44 flights, and they were spectacular flights, way in the ozones. The bird would go way out. You got to let him fly. The bird would go a half a mile or further away, look like he's leaving, and all of a sudden clink, lock in, find easy air, take it into the heavens. As soon as my pointer Jones and I started walking towards the pond, she just come drifting across the sky. And there was another pond a quarter of a mile away. So, and this is where I learned about racing duck flights, which are the best duck flights of all. Madison Haley and I talked a lot about that back in those days. And so you'd flush the ducks, and they fly straight towards the distant pond. And the ducks don't turn to come back because they have a destination, just enough distance they think they can make it. And you get these outrageous stoops. And this peregrine timed the stoops. It'd come in angles 45 degrees and come in over like 500 feet over them, then bank into the vertical and kill them within 2 to 10 feet of the edge of the next pond. It's like she was timing it to play the game. It was spectacular. That's all you can say. I learned a whole new realm of duck hawking that year. And of course I thought, yep, I'm going to do that. That's the gig. Of course, I lost that pair. Pre-telemetry era, that bird was gone in January of its second season. lost in the desert. But anyhow, well, some people will write an article, and this always kills me. They have a good season, they do something special, and that's awesome. I mean, it totally is, no matter what it is. But they write like this is something you can achieve every day. And what I learned from that is I have hawked hard my whole life. I'm not a really highly talented falconer, but I hawk them hard, and they sort it out because I push them hard, and I know how to manage weight. That's the bottom line. And anyway, it took me 30 years to replicate that flying. And I was up here, I don't know, I was flying chips, so go back 10 years ago. And I've been living here a long time at that, 30 years here at that time. So it was longer than 30 years, actually. Anyhow, long story short, I'm driving down the trail, going to the hills where the duck ponds are, because that's where they were at that time. And there's this little mud puddle right off the side of the road. And if you drove by at dawn, 50 mallards would flush off this tiny puddle, like 20 yards in diameter. It's like to die for a duck hawker, you know what I mean? Like kill me ponds are what we call them. And but as soon as they saw a car, they were out of there because it was right by the road. So I had a hybrid named Chip. He was actually my best grouse killer ever. I wouldn't say he's the best bird, but he was the best grouse killer. I mean, to put it in perspective, he killed 92 grouse in 97 flights in one season. I'll never replicate that again in my life. It was just, all the stars were in alignment that year. But that was the quality of this bird. Big sky eater, loved mallards. He realized they were easier to catch, so he locked onto the greenheads. It was good. So I put him up a half a mile away from the pond, and I trained my birds to follow my truck. I'm too old to do a half a mile run to a pond for a bird. I just won't do it. So I train them, I put them up, and I just start driving my truck. And of course, the birds know what I'm doing. And of course, the bird goes real high and wide like this. And there was a marsh about 400 yards away from this tiny puddle. And they were coming off this marsh to water in this water because the marsh was kind of saline. And anyway, we drive up, I'd open the door step and say, "Hi, guys." They're all just going like this. And of course, all of them just blaze. The trick, of course, was flushing with the falcon just wide enough that it has to power stoop the whole way to kill the duck before the marsh. And it was it's probably the second best hawking season I ever had, because at that point I was killing a duck at dawn. And I'm going, now what am I going to do? I only had the one bird at the time. And anyway, so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to kill a mallard and a grouse every day. That'll be my goal for October. What the heck? Ducks are gone by the end of October anyway. So we went out every morning. We hit that pond every morning, and we flew and killed. I think in October we had 20 mornings where we killed a mallard and a grouse every morning. It was fun. It was spectacular. And I haven't had a chance to replicate that since. I had some great duck hawking since, and just not that exact thing. So I could write a book and tell you, I know all about duck hawking. Let me tell you, this is how it's done. Well, good luck trying to replicate something that was good once. Anyway, it's like a sniper that shoots a 4,000 yard shot and he hits it once. Yeah, take another shot.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, like I've had this conversation many a times with other falconers, and even on this podcast, it's like, I don't know which is more of a blessing or if it's more of a curse to have a good bird as one of your first, or maybe even your first bird.
There are a lot of cases of that. Lots of them.
Mm-hmm.
They have one good hawk and they go years and may not ever get one even like it. I can think of a guy that authored a book that some people think highly of. And, well, I can see all kinds of holes in it, of course. And I'm not going to over-criticize it. He went to the trouble. But it was all based on one bird. One bird. Mm-hmm. And after that bird, never had anything even close. So, I pretty much don't read falconry books anymore. I ran into Steve Chingren at the California meet last year. And Steve gifted me with a copy of his grouse book. The better rendition of it, I was told. I don't know. But I was touched. I was really nice, because I know he's as crazed about hunting sage grouse as I've been about these sharp-tailed grouse my whole life. And so that was really nice. And I have to say, I didn't read. I'm ashamed to say I didn't bring it home and read it. I have a tough time reading falconry stuff. But anyways, my shooting partner, Jerry, he goes hawking every day with me all season. Pretty much every day unless something else comes up. And he knows more about hawking grouse and upland birds than most of the falconers do, just because he goes every day. And anyway, I said, read this. Tell me what you think. And it was probably one of the nicer compliments I've ever got, and I think it's a real cool compliment to Steve, is, 2 weeks later he came back, we were going home, he says, here's your book. And I said, well, what'd you think? He says, well, I would have thought you wrote it. Really? Well, now he piqued my interest, and there is a huge quantity of similarities between how he does things and I do things, which shouldn't be surprising, I guess. But I have to admit, it was a nice read. It's a nice read. And if I were to tell a young guy you want a nice read, get that book, because it shows you what hard work does. He's worked really hard at what he does. And that's what brings things together. Learn from others' mistakes and qualities. Even the people that are, I've been out and watched some pretty poor falconers, but you can learn from them. I will never do that. That's a learning process. Whatever. That's a valuable tool. Oh, that was a terrible mistake. I didn't expect that. That's a valuable lesson to save for later. As the saying goes, you don't live long enough to make all the mistakes yourself. So learn from others. I've only had what I think 2 original thoughts about falconry. That's it. 2. What I consider original. I've never read or heard from anybody before I came up with the thoughts. One was in 1974, somewhere right around there, Herb Sparks, who you should talk to about Merlins if you haven't. You really should. He's a guy worth talking to. He's been flying 2 to 5 Merlins a season for over 40 years. But he's worth talking to. It's all small bird hawking. He actually has a peregrine and 2 Merlins right now that he's molting out. But he's obsessed. It's awesome. And, he's really meticulous, and, he has routines and stuff. He's a worthy talk to, and he's fun to talk to. But anyway, we were talking, and I was kind of helping him. I had moved to New Mexico. I was in New Mexico then, and he was grooming his first imprint prairie falcon. And so he asked me, so what exactly is it you're trying to do to get him to do what you do? Because he had watched both that imprint prairie emerald, the first really great falcon I ever flew, and then he got to watch Lucille, the Intermediate Passage peregrine fly, who was spectacular. And so so we were conversing back and forth, and after maybe 2 beers too many, whatever it happened to be, I came up with this saying, and I mispronounced the second word on purpose at the time, but what it is, when flying falcons, and this goes for just about even training good quality English pointers and stuff, the principle is you have to try to get the maximum amount of manipulation with a minimum amount of inhibition. When I made it up, I said maximum amount of manipulation, minimum amount of inhibition. Well, there is no inhibition, it's inhibition. I knew that, but I rhymed it up, and I gave Herb that piece of knowledge. It took me a long time to sort that in my head. And that principle has served me forever. It's totally a truism. That's what now, if some people are control freaks, okay, they want their bird right here. The 400 feet's good enough, and if they kill their duck or whatever it is, they're happy as a clam. And I'm not belittling that. That's their own gig. Have a great time. But I want my goal, and this is in my journals. I have all my journals from all the years of hawking. And the other thing that took me embarrassingly probably 30 years to come to grips with, and from when I first started my first bird, is that why the hell was it? I don't care if it's a red tail or if it's a darn falcon or a kestrel. Why did they learn the bad traits so much faster than the good traits? You know, it's apparent. I mean, anybody's flown more than 5 birds knows that to be true. It's a truism. All right. So here's what eventually drummed up in my head in some lonely night, because I've always had sleep deprivation issues, so I sleep about 4 hours a night. But anyway, and this came to me, and what it boiled down to is, all right, I'll try to get it right. In nature, what you're always trying to do is emulate nature as much as possible, right? If you don't know what to do falconry-wise, look at nature and see what's going on there and take your cues from there. That's probably one of the smartest things you can do. But in nature, what happens is that, let's take a prairie falcon, or a peregrine, better yet, a peregrine. Everybody loves peregrines. All right, a peregrine's flying along down the way. All right, and it's flying, and there's a magpie, and it stoops and swoops and just, bam, catches a magpie. Comes down on the ground, and it's a young bird. I mean, I had a trapped peregrine off the beach one time that still had down on its tail. All right, to show how that's how young they are. All right, and so it catches the magpie and goes to the ground, and that young bird says, "Yep, that's what my niche is going to be, magpies. That was simple. I'm going to do it." So he spends the next 5 days trying to catch magpies. Now the bird's low in condition, and he's going to die. Simple as that. All right. So what has to happen is, in order to develop a niche, that has to happen slowly over a period of time to develop enough methodology and technique and success on a species, that it can do it repeatedly. And then they develop a niche, like catching rails along a river. Wild peregrines do that, but they have to learn that slowly. They can't just catch a rail on a small pond and say, "I'm hunting rails from now on," because they're easy, because the next 5 days you might not see a rail by a small pond. So that's the whole point. The reason they learn this stuff slowly is because they have to learn slowly. It's a ingrained survival. It's genetically ingrained into them to not adopt to something too fast. So we shouldn't be surprised when we're having a slow time getting a bird to catch crows or magpies or ducks or anything, it takes repetition, constant successful repetition. And that in itself is refreshing to know. You shouldn't feel bad when you're having trouble making a hawk. I get real anxiety driven when I have a young bird that's not killing like it should. All right. And until I get it done, and I always get it done, but there's always I'm anxiety driven. What can I say? But so that was an important thought, because now that's really taken away a whole lot of concerns for me, big time, because they are going to learn the bad things quicker than the good things. Like, hey, I don't chase birds through chain link fences. I slashed into one once. You don't want that to be a multiple affair, It won't be a multiple affair. So they have to learn what not to do much faster than what to do. So your real goal in falconry isn't showing them what to do. It's keeping them from learning what not to do is what you're really trying to get them to do.
It's an interesting take on it. Yeah.
And that's what you're really doing. Yeah, we guide. We use principles of positive reinforcement. I learned so much one year. It's a joke. And it was, I don't remember the year, but I was flying an imprint prairie falcon in her 4th or 5th season. I don't know. And I had this. No, actually, it was her 3rd season. But anyway, I had that bird, and I went hunting with a friend. He's a Hungarian refugee named Louis Pesti that lived here in Saskatchewan. And he taught himself falconry and did a pretty good job. His birds flew 200-300 feet and killed stuff on a regular basis. And I went down hawking, and of course I was flying mine, the way I flew at that time, and I didn't do multiple flights and stuff. I flew one good flight, reward well, and that was my humanistic notion of what should be done. And Louis said, well, I don't do that. If I can get 5 flights in a day, I'm taking 5 flights a day. I'm out here to hunt, blah, blah, blah. And we had this dickering going back and forth. That's pretty strong-willed at those years, And but anyway, we went home. We had a great time. I caught a rooster pheasant. He caught a hunt. It was a great day. And I went home and I stewed on that. I finished the season. I stewed on it through the summer. And I finally thought, how can you argue against someone that's flying multiple flights a day with a large falcon unless you've actually ever done it? That's just stupid. All right, you need to challenge yourself. And if you're not willing to make that test, fine, but you can't belittle what that guy's doing because you don't even have the facts, right? You only have half the picture. So that next year, I decided, all right, we'll fly multiples on ducks. Now, this is an imprint. She was a good bird, but she was really aggressive on kills and possessive and stuff, like some of them are. And that didn't bother me. You just pick them up, move on. It's no big deal. I don't care how they fly and what they do. That's the most important thing. But anyway, so I started hunting ducks, and 1st of September as always, and I hunted till October 23rd, freeze up. And that prairie falcon killed 93 ducks in that time. 2 days killed 5 ducks in a morning. All right. And I learned a lot. And what I really learned is, first off, when you're flying them that much, they come into great condition really fast. So I started seeing higher quality falconry sooner. Okay. Not only that, the bird got to the point where she knew she was getting multiple kills a day. And ironically, she started flying higher and better. And she'd kill a duck, and I'd pull the leg. I always just fed the duck thigh, hold it there. She'd step off. Her manners got better. Totally the opposite of what you would think. Totally opposite. And I'm going, what the heck, And so we kept pushing. She got better and better. And sometimes the 3rd or 4th flight of the day, we're the highest, best flights of the day. Everybody says, oh, the bird will fly worse and worse. That's wrong. That's a bird that's not in condition. So I learned a huge amount about conditions. This is all pre-kite era, pre-drones, all this stuff. It was, you go hawking and make your bird. And anyway, so I learned a whole lot about how fast you can actually put them in condition if they're worked really hard. And anyway, long story short, that went really great. And then we moved on to uplands and flying sharptails as much as I could, mostly, unless we got snowed out, and then it was hunts. But and ironically, catching 1 sharptail a day is challenging enough. Nonetheless, catching 2 or maybe even 3, but and odds are against you. When you're flying a small prairie falcon, you're flying a 2-pound, 36 to 40 ounce grouse that can take a hit from a sledgehammer and get up and fly into the ozone. I mean, it's a lot tougher. Well, so we were catching 1 a day or every other day or whatever the case might be, enough to keep the bird really pushing hard. Guess what? Her manners got back to just how they were before we were doing the multiples. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to hear this stuff, but here's the problem is what I've had to do over the years is I now sort everything into 2 problems. All right. And they're all resolvable with one answer. All right. One problem, is it a bird problem or is it a people problem? Wind and heat are people problems, not bird problems. Absolutely. Oh, it's too hot to fly my hawk. Not true. Your bird's too fat to fly in the heat. Yes, that's a people problem. Okay, so designating and segregating the differences between those two is really important to understand to decide what move to make. And as another friend and I, a friend of mine from South Carolina, he's a short winger, but we've been friends forever. I helped him fly his first falcons and stuff, and we're just good friends. And he relates everything to what he does in his short wing world, and it boiled down that almost all problems, almost all of them, are solved by one of 3 things: wait, wait, or wait. Simple.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example. I had a gerfalcon imprint that hit a greenhead so hard he broke his leg in his first season. He is up for weeks, with that. And anyway, I won't go into all the details, but the long story short on that is I didn't hood him for all that time. And then when we come out of the chamber with his leg good enough to start flying again, he decided there is no way you're putting that thing on my head. And he was a pussycat of a kid. My kids could hug him and stuff. He was just a really nice bird. But there was no way he was going to play the game I wanted to play. It was weird. I just behaviorally, gerfalcon stuff, they have a whole different world of things. But I sent him off to my friend to be used for breeding for a couple of years. And then I got him back and he was being his arrogant self. And I said, enough of this noise. I'm going to put the screws to you until you behave. And I did. That jur that flew at 38 3/4 ounces at jerkin. Well, lo and behold, you know what I found out? When he was at 36 ounces, that's 2 3/4 ounces sharper. All of a sudden, he was the nice bird he should have been, and I could hood him and unhood him. He flew higher and better and killed more often and all this stuff because there was people problems involved as opposed to a bird. It wasn't a bird problem. It was a people problem. And those are the things that are sometimes very difficult to sort out. It's like if you breed livestock of any time, whether it be pointers or pigeons or anything, segregating the hereditary against the environmental is exceptionally difficult in any livestock breeding. It's the same thing, so it's cool stuff.
It makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah. It makes complete sense because, there's so many things that, we as falconers do to contribute to our own problems. Sometimes it's hard for us to get out of our own way.
I'm guilty of Sarge. Yeah, I'm guilty.
All of us are.
Yeah,
all of us
absolutely.
are.
You just got to start trying to be more laid back and more concerned about yourself and what you're doing than what the bird's doing. That'll help you. It will.
Sure. Yeah. You or what you said was spot on about the more you fly your bird, the better, the more fit it's going to be. And also, you'll find that some of the other issues start solving themselves more too, just because your bird's already fit. It already knows what's going on. And it's kind of like, it's kind of an analogy to it, like say something like red tails and squirrels. If you hunt your red tail every day on squirrels, it's going to get that much stronger from pumping up and laddering up all the time and pursuing more squirrels every day. And if you only hunt it a couple times a week, for example, on it, then it's going to struggle miserably because it's not fit enough to constantly reclimb back up. And it's so on and so forth.
Yeah. I visited Falconry in New York and I enjoyed his company. He toured me around and showed me some cool stuff there. We're visiting my wife's family. They were in Connecticut at the time. And anyway, long story short, he had a red tail. And so, it was really pretty rough country to hawk, I thought. And I grew up short winging. And I said, well, how much game do you catch with a red tail here a season? No, I don't know, between 2 and 8 things a year. And I said, well, how do you even have the bird get confidence? He says, he catches his snakes and mice and stuff too. And I thought, okay, so it's just a different take. I see, if I lived there, I wouldn't own a bird like that. I'd get a sharp-shinned hawk and go slay unprotected species, of course, and have fun. And, I don't get it. Like, it's getting like flying grouse all winter long, and I'm saying until February 28th. It's hard work, and nobody can say it isn't because not very many people actually have done one full winter of grouse hawking every day. Not very many at all, and it's hard work and it's physically taxing. I've hiked home 8 miles in 25 below zero with blowing snow because my car died out on the grouse grounds. There's no homes to go to. So you walk. It was pre-cell phone, so you hump it home. And, if I had to do that today, like I blew the hamstring out of my right leg. I have no hamstring in my right leg because I blew it out when I was trapping a peregrine. The weight came loose, and the bird's dragging a plastic empty. He had sand in the plastic bottle for the weight, and the plastic bottle broke and drained all the sand out. So the bird's just dragging this piece of plastic on 10 feet of line and a pigeon under it. And I'm trying to run after this darn pigeon or peregrine to catch it. And I'm going, holy shit. And I think, I got to give it. So, what was I? I was 58 at the time. So I put the pedal to the metal. And man, I was going fast. All of a sudden, what's with my leg? It's wobbling. All of a sudden, poof, went flying through there. Told the big hamstring on the back of my leg totally segregated, gone. Went to the ground, hit the ground like so hard. It was like I felt like a car had hit me. That's how bad it was. And the parents. Now this old friend of mine's, Father John's, down the road in the truck when I was doing this, and I'm laying in the road, and he's in the truck saying, "What is he doing now?" Like he wasn't like a real keyed in falconer. He's dabbled in falconry for 50 years, but he's just a great guy. Anyhow, and he's wondering what I was doing, and he leans out the window and yells, "What you doing, Dale?" I said, "Get down here. I just broke my leg running." Of course, when I hit the ground, I was laying, I said, "God, I'm getting old. I broke my leg just running, really?" So the guy comes up and he says, "What's wrong?" I says, "I broke my." "How'd you break your leg?" He said, "I don't know. I'm a wimp or something, And anyway, he says, "What should I do?" I said, "Go get the peregrine. Don't worry about me. Go get the peregrine." And so he gets the peregrine. He's coming back and he says, "What I should do?" I says, "We're totally unprepared for this." I said, "Well, cut the sleeve off your coat and we'll slide him in the sleeve and use that for a sock." There's no way he's cutting the sleeve off his coat. It goes on. It gets worse. He empties out a toolbox. He puts it in carefully, closes it in this little dark toolbox, and keeps it slightly ajar on his lap to keep air for it. And he said, "What now?" I said, "Dial 911. He looks at me, "Dale, they'll never find us." And I go, "Oh God, you're right." So I get the truck, back the truck up toward me, so we can slide me up in the back of this truck. I mean, I was in agony, like you can't imagine. And so he's back in the truck. Now John's, older, and I think, oh my God, if he pops the clutch, he's going to drive right over me. So I was actually concerned he's going to drive over me. But we got it stopped, and we got me up, and I said, maybe I can get to the front of the truck. We got me in the front of the truck with great pain. We drove to the hospital. I called a falconer in the city. He came out to help John with the peregrine, but they wouldn't come out of the hospital. We're parked by the emergency door, and I'm in agony, and they wouldn't come out and get me out, help me out of the truck to get me in the hospital. I'm 30 feet from the hospital door. And they said, "Call EMS." So my buddy,
oh my God,
runs around, goes in the hospital, pulls out the wheelchair. We get me in there. We had to go in through the front door into emergency. It was a gong show. Anyway.
Oh my God. Well, that sounds amazing.
We've had all kinds of crazy things. It's just, it's miles. Lots of fun hawking and all that kind of stuff. There's no sport that offers the reward that falconry does, and there's no sport that can be so devastating as falconry is. It's just
for sure.
Simple as that. You're either on, if you're running on the real high, there's only one direction. Something's going to happen.
Yep, it's the roller coaster effect, man. Yeah, it's the roller coaster effect. You climb to the top, you're at the top for a minute, and then you plunge right to the bottom for sure. But I'm loving all the stories. Like I said, I was telling Lynn this earlier. You guys that got into the sport, back in the early days are always full of so many awesome stories and a wealth of knowledge. But before we go any further, though, I do want to know what initially got you into falconry. When did you discover or when did you find out about it, and how did you go about getting into it?
1960. Okay. My best friend, we grew up together door by door, and his father got transferred to Lockheed up by Santa Cruz, California, up in that area. And he was a rocket engineer. And anyway, they moved up north, and my mother's closest friend lived up near San Francisco. So we were going up to visit my mother's friend. They were really close to us, the family was, and they'd moved up there too. And so we stopped in to visit our friends, and in the backyard, they had a red tail sitting on a perch. And it was my friend's Bill's red tail. And I saw it, and it was an adult, and I wasn't very impressed. It was just a bird to me. And then he was all revved up and stuff, of course. And so he went to the house, and he dug out, he had some old National Geographics, which most everybody knows about those. And we were going through them, and I was looking at the Fertez one. That was pretty nice. And from 1926, December 1926. And he pulled out a 1954 National Geographic. And it wasn't really a falconry thing at all. They had a picture of a Cooper's hawk, pictures, I think, of a red tail, and a picture of a kestrel. And there was this guy in a red plaid jacket with his hand out like this. His hand out like this with a little tidbit on it, and a kestrel with his feet out, a male kestrel, his feet stretched out and the wings back. And it was just landing on his fist. I found out later that was Heinz Meng. He'd have been about 20 maybe, and it had the kestrel landing on it. And I saw that picture, and I knew right then, that's what I was going to do. I collected all the geographics ever done, and I had them as just little cutouts. And one year, my great Aunt Harriet, I didn't know it, had snuck away with my National Geographics. And she went and had them all bound and put in this, had it bound for me in this book, see? So anyway, this has all the original geographic things. At that age, I was going to the library every day, and the librarian taught me how to use a periodical guide to literature, how to use an index card files, and all that. And I collected everything I could get my hands on. I have notebooks full of cutouts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I also went and started working. I think I was 11 when I started working at a local bookstore for this lady. It was called Alpha Books, and Betty Vasson was her name, and her husband, Ray. They ran this little bookstore. He ran a mail order thing, and she ran the bookstore, and they paid me on Saturdays. I'd go in. I got 50 cents an hour, and I organized stacks, and if I found anything that had to do with falconry, I could have it. All right? And so I started doing that in libraries, and I went to town, and anyway, I used to have a really good collection of books. I had almost every printed book for falconry there was, except a few. I basically sold them all so I could go on trips to go get birds. Anyway, but long story short, I think it was January, so it was probably in June or July. I was at our friend's place and saw that in January. My father was hunting javelina in Arizona, out in the bush. They had a camp there, and of course they're sitting around a campfire. And of course, my dad probably would say, "Yeah, my son doesn't care about bow hunting pigs. He wants to train birds of all damn thing." I'm sure it was something like that. Turned out one of the guys in the camp was a falconer, and lived 8 miles from us. Amazing. Anyway, so
funny.
Yeah, he came back, and about 2 weeks later, he came over and visited, and we talked, and realized I'd actually been doing my homework. And so Saturday morning, he came over, picked me up, and we went trapping. I had my first falcon an hour and a half later. Been at it ever since.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
No, it's great. No, I mean, like like I said, it's what I was saying earlier is I always like talking to you guys that have been at this before. There was hardly any regs or, hardly much in the ways of, of any of that stuff, because you all have unique paths and how you got into all this and learned. And a lot of times it was so DIY still.
Really, for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
The guy that helped me trap my first hawk, you're going to love this one. He came in and we trapped two. He trapped one for himself. He had a 12-year-old peels at the time, sitting in his backyard. And anyway, so that many got it in 48 or something. Anyway, but long story short, he said, all right, we're going to fly these 2 kestrels next Saturday. You have a week to get this bird ready. And okay. So I lived that bird for a week. I took it out, free flew it. On Saturday, it flew off, circled around, and came back and landed on my fist. And he said, well, fly it again. So I put it out the second time, and it flew away. And he said, well, your lesson here today is never fly your bird because somebody wants you to see it fly. That's pretty funny. And Sunday morning, I went out and I got my second bird.
That's amazing.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, that's like the perfect lesson right there. Yeah.
Yeah, he lost his peels shortly after that, and he never flew birds again after that. Just he's done. Yeah, but still, I remember that as clear as a bell. It's just priceless.
Yeah, it is one of the most amazing things I've heard. It's just like, yeah, well, we know we can get you one again tomorrow, so I'm just going to be an ass and teach you.
No concern, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, out of curiosity, I mean, I know kind of like when Mark and I were starting to kind of put this series together and he was telling me about you, he said that you've been, pretty well traveled, kind of done a lot of, so many different things. I mean, we're not going to be able to cover anywhere near all the things I'm sure that you've had in your history, your personal falconry history in this one episode. It's impossible. But I mean, out of all the things you've done, what's been the most rewarding, or what's been your most, I don't know, what's been the coolest thing you've seen in your travels or your personal falconry experience to this day, you think?
Oh, and to be honest, in travels, most of the really good stuff has been here not just here in Saskatchewan, but some in California, some in Idaho, scattered around. I mean, probably the most significant change of something that I did was in 2000. Of course, I was my methodology is pretty sophisticated by then, for getting birds to do what I want them to do. But I really did go a whole new league step higher that year. I mean, I've been kind of not stuck in a rut because what I was doing was really good. And I was happy with the stuff I was seeing prior to that. But a bird named Jack was the next giant step forward, is a quantum step for me of understanding and everything. And I'll run through that and real quickly. I mean, we could spend a couple hours just talking about this one thing. So anyway, I got Jack. I want an 18-day-old, parent raised from the day he hatched till the day he is sent to me at 18 days. I don't want him younger. I don't want to spend a whole pile of time having to finger feed a baby and all this stuff. So the bottom line is 18 days. You can get them. They're just a little huffy, but you can forceps feed them 3 or 4 times off a little saucer of food, and then just hold the saucer in front and they'll reach and peck the food up. They're old enough to do that. So from that day on, when they're sleeping, I put the little saucer of food in there. Once they'll peck food off the saucer, they don't ever see me deliver food. I've been saying this for 40 years, food by discovery. And so I did that. That's normal stuff. I mean, pretty much everybody knows that nowadays. But anyway, long story short, as he matured, I started putting him out on the block, and to feed him in the mornings, I'd put half a quail carcass, and I don't like quail as a rule for hawk food. Blackbirds and stuff are my choice. I go shoot them and stuff. But if you have a quail, whatever, you put the food on the ground, and I have a string run over here and then up to my deck and around. I have a chair up on my deck with coffee in the morning and stuff, and I go out and just set him on there. And I'd go up, sit on the deck, and I just pull the string, and it moves to the side of me, sees his food, and he just jumps over to the food, all right? And he'd eat and hop back up, and we'd go over and sit down and have him hop up on my knee and stuff and be the nice birds that they are, let him eat all he wanted. And then in the afternoon, about 4:30 or so, I would do the same thing. So they just are on the block. You take them off the block, put them somewhere for a bit, and then set it all up, go out, put the bird down, leave, go, set up. So I'm really not in the food loop. He's going. So then after do that, I hang the meat from a overhead clothesline down, and I put the block by it. Trying to train a bird to a lure that's a bit on the heavy side is not very successful. So you're just going to stand there, and you are now part of the food loop. Bad plan. Mm-hmm. All right. So I hang the food there. I go up, put him on the block, and I just walk away. And I go up, sit on the deck, and read or do whatever. And I just set it far enough he can't grab it, and he can't jump up and grab it. He ultimately just flaps his wings, goes up and lands on it, and it pulls the quick release and comes down to the ground. Well, the bird's round-winged at this time. It's a long way from actual being hard pinned, but it's already flying up and taking a lure out of the air, and I'm not involved. All right. So I made that step, and we pressed that till they'd fly in my little picket fence area I do this in. I can do about 15 feet where he'll fly at 15 feet, grab it, and come to the ground. And this bird got all he wanted to eat twice a day, pretty much how it'd be in nature. That's about how it goes. And I wasn't involved in the food loop at all. And this bird, well before he's hard pinned, I had the kite up. We were out in the field and have him do the same thing out in the field at the kite. And I'd let him eat. He'd take the small amount, eat it. We'd go put him in the truck, dress it up again, put him on there. The second thing, a big chunk fly up in the morning and eat all he wanted. All he wanted. He'd walk off. He'd pick it up, carry it over. We'd be in chairs sitting by him with a cup of coffee, and he'd tuck the remaining scraps by our feet, just put them by our feet. And so I was doing this twice a day. All the food he wanted to eat, twice a day, just like he's in the wild. And so then we got onto the serious kite stuff, and we just carried on with that, and before he's hard pinned, he was already circling, going up 200 feet to the lure. All right. The kite's totally proactive. I mean, you can screw up, but if you're careful with it, you can't do anything to make the bird bad, But so we got it going, and so we do 2 times, one call to a small amount of food, set him in the truck for 10 minutes, sip on our coffee. My wife would be out there. We'd be sitting in a chair in a field. People drive by looking at us like, what are they doing, But and most people know what I do. But anyhow, long story short, and then we go out at 4:30 when the wind was still up. If I waited till 6, there'd be no wind. There were no drones then. And we do it a second time. And we had actually perfect conditions that year. The stars were in alignment for us to do that. And so we did. That bird flew 4 times a day, every day, eating all he wanted twice a day. And he was a July 4th Downy, so he was really perfect timing. So when the season opened, he hadn't wasted any of his natural chase and pursuit stuff because he'd been delayed in development, right? So all the development is just perfectly along nature's trail. And first time I put him up, and I trained him to follow the truck for a bit to go to the kite too once the kite was up. And I don't ever kite like over 600 feet. There's no point in that. I mean, what makes a bird fly high? What they're hunting. Because you can have them fly 2,000 feet, and depending on your environment, they will determine what is most effective for the environment and what you're doing. And they will adjust their pitches accordingly. As simple as that. So anyway, long story short, went out opening day, put that bird up, drove, he followed the truck. He's looking for the kite. He's climbing because he knows it's up there somewhere. And he knows to follow the truck because I would drive towards. I'd put him up a third of a mile off and start driving. He'd just start flying, climbing into the wind. And we get closer. He says, oh, there's the kite. And he just ring up and take it. And I don't have a parachute or anything where they pop out and they come drifting down with a parachute or slide down the line. I never do that. I have a loop in my kite line. I tie the lure to the kite line. All right. And they grab it, and they're not coming down easy. They get aggressive about bringing that lure down. They actually use more energy pulling the lure down and the kite down. I help running the kite down a bit, but they're pulling, working hard, bringing the lure down to the ground. That does 2 things. you have a long line so you don't go charging in on them, you know, so you have like 40 feet of line. So they hit the ground, you stop, you walk up, untie it, tie it to your bag, drop the bag, let them have the lure, settle down, and they learn to grapple. Every bird I've ever done this with has never lost the first thing they ever caught. Never. They have clamps, man. They know to clamp. And I took that bird out on opening day, put it up. I drove not a quarter of a mile. I didn't know, without being in the same field all the time, I didn't know how he'd respond, but he followed the truck. There's a habit. And by the time I got out of the truck to flush the ducks, he's like 700 feet higher than he ever went to the kite. We flushed the ducks. He killed a duck on his first flight. You know, and anyway, long story short, by following nature's lead there with the twice a day thing, and the reason you can get away with feeding twice a day, people say, oh, that's BS. Well, it's not, because in the summertime it's hot. They don't have the appetite to crop up unless you've carved them down. They eat. They got a little bit of food showing, they're good. If they eat much more, they'll throw it up because it's too hot. So it's perfect. It works perfect. And anyway, so as the hunting season went on with this bird, and we never flew the kite again after that, not once. That bird would fly 2,000 feet like that, on staggeringly fast. Within a month of hunting, he learned to elevate her in the wind. He faced the wind, don't fly in circles, face the wind towards you, upwind, and just elevate straight up in the sky. And he could go up 1,000, 2,000 feet in seconds. It was unbelievable. And so that bird set a whole new paradigm of what is really possible, because Naren Gillies, falconer in Saskatoon, came out, and I helped him step up his falconry game some years before, and he was coming down regularly to hawk with me. And anyway, we were flying grouse. We had a big flock, probably 30 or 40 birds. And he was maybe 2,000 feet and well out of position, and grouse just got up and left on their own. He stooped across the sky, knocked one down a half a mile out, pitched up, rang back up just as high, and started coming back, and because he'd seen the others leave. So as he's coming, we go into flush, and more piling out, and he's in a full stoop from the stratosphere. And the last one up, he switched to the last one up. It was awesome. And it still got like 150 yards before he got down to it. And he obliterated it, pitched around and went down on it. It was probably 20 feet from a large chokecherry bush. It would have been safe, and didn't make it. And so Naren and I went over to him, got in the truck and drove over, got out, walked up, and he's just standing in the ground beside the grouse. And I went over, showed him he was on the grouse, actually. He wasn't on the ground, but he was on the grouse, but just not eating. Showed him my fist. He hopped up off the grouse on my fist. I hooded him up and picked up the grouse. And I remember Naren says, how do you get him to do that? And I said, well, it's all in how you talk to him, you know, some curt, stupid answer, you know.
Right.
But,
right.
Anyway, and then we went out and killed another one 30 minutes later, you know, and that bird in his first season killed 72 sharptails in his first season. He killed 104 birds, and I think it was 108 flights. I'd have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And no, it was 128 flights, I think. Yeah, I think it was 128. It was 104 birds and 128 flights in the season. 62 of them sharptails. The rest were huns and a handful of ducks. But, you know, it is a whole new paradigm. And unfortunately, he got killed in his fourth season on his 200th grouse, you know, and by a horned owl. You know, they're not my friends. We have a little talk every once in a while, the horned owls and I. But anyway, to carry on, the next bird I got to replace him, I pretty much followed the same thing. He came a little later than he should have, but that's okay. We got through everything okay. And he was, well, yeah, Jack's best. I think I only ever killed 2 grouse in a day with him. And, you know, he could, I think the one of example, we flew, he killed a grouse. I picked him up. There were still 20 out in the field. I walked back to the truck. He wasn't hardly even eating. He was eating a bit. So, oh, what the heck. I gave him the Michigan slip. That's where you yank the food up from the glove, you know. And that's what we call that. And anyway, 10 minutes later, I thought, well, if I keep waiting here, they're just going to fly away. So I got out after 10 minutes after that flight, put him up. He flew even better than the first flight and killed the second one, just like that. I mean, he was that competent. And so that kind of set a whole new paradigm. And I've done it with different birds, and it will hold true, especially if you have weather conditions. Now with drones, it'd be even easier to do. The only thing wrong with that is they don't really learn to fly in the wind. And that's a problem here because we have wind every day. And like most days, by the time I go out hawking at 1 o'clock, and because grouse go to bed by 3:30 in the late season out into the pastures and stuff. And sometimes you can't get in there because of snow or whatever. So we hunt the peripheries. And so I hunt at 1 o'clock until I'm done by 3:30. And if I'm flying two birds, then I spend probably 3 to 4 hours out a day, but it's doable. That chip bird, I mean, he was unbelievable. We're staggered. How did he kill so many grouse? And long story short, Mark Williams and Mark Adams, the week after, Mark took some pictures of him flying in the meet. And he sent me a picture, and he had a picture of Chip. He's flying through the sky, and he's carrying the grouse by its head. I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. I never saw that. And then a week later, after the meet, I'm down in Yellowgrass with Mark Adams, a guy that comes out and hawks out here for a couple months every fall from Ontario. Great guy. And he had his camera going, and he got a picture. And here's Chip, again, carrying a grouse by its head. And I think, now I get why he doesn't ever lose them. He never lost a grouse, not one. I mean, it's amazing. And he was an amazing bird. And but he was nurtured pretty much the same way. In the afternoons, he'd fly 2 or 3 times handily. In his first season as a baby, we had a guy from Britain over here come out hawking with us. Nairn came down with his prairie falcon Katana, which was a great prairie falcon. And I was flying Jazz, a hybrid, and Chip, the youngster. And it's probably our most productive day of hawking we've had when I've ever had company. And we went out, and we had the Brit guy with us who'd never done any real hawking here. He just, but anyway, long story short, that Chip bird, I flew grouse with him 4 times that day. He killed 3 sharptails in a row. And on the 4th flight, he's up just as great as ever. We're going to go for a 4th grouse and flush a covey of huns. So he comes in, sucks up a hun like it was standing still, comes to the ground. And then I flew Jazz, the old hybrid. Now, this bird was one of those that had those little seizure things, right? And so I was pretty careful with him. But I flew him twice, and he killed 2 sharptails, too. And then Nairn flew his prairie grouse twice. This is all one day, too, Flew grouse twice. And we're talking, this is like the end of November. I mean, hawking ain't easy. It flew his prairie grouse, pile drove a grouse. We were going to get it, went there, and it went down a badger hole. All right. And I said, man, you got robbed. It was, it probably died down there. That's how hard nothing hits as hard as a prairie does, ounce for ounce, nothing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he flew his prairie again at a grouse, and it pile drove a second one. And they had pushed up a hedgerow into a big pile of garbage, right? Instead of going to the cover we had hoped it would go to if he didn't get it, it went to that pile, and we couldn't get it out unless we'd have set it on fire. But he got burned on his 2 grouse flights. So I said, Nairn, we're going for huns. So he went out, and he flew twice and killed 2 huns really nice. We killed 8 birds and 10 flights in that one day, and this guy from Britain was with us. I'm sure he went home thinking, man, this stuff is easy over here. Yeah. That's probably the most productive day I've ever had, at least for, I don't count duck hawking that way. I mean, that's a whole different ball game. But for uplands, God, what's that? 5 grouse and 2 huns. No, there's something else in there. 3 grouse and a hun. That's 4. Yeah, and then Jazz caught 2 grouse. So they caught 5 grouse and 3 huns that day. That's a pretty awesome day to have. Just one you can't forget. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And especially like with long winging and I mean, it's the good places for long winging, along with everything else, just keep getting, just smaller and smaller.
I hate to say it, the golden years are over, and I don't care what anybody says. I know many falconers all over the United States, all over the place, and they're all saying the same things. That loss of habit. I've lost probably 20% of what I consider good prime habitat because they've oh heavens, our tractors can only drive in a straight line now because I can't have my nap using the GPS. So they plow and fill. They spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars getting rid of. They could have driven around for 50 years and not spent half that money. Just it's appalling. But I must plug away best I can. I'm just getting to the point. Late winter hawking's really hard for me. I don't know how long I can keep that up. Ain't getting younger. Darn. Eh?
Very true. It's been amazing hearing, all these stories, and sometime we'll have to do a part 2, to hear even more of them. But I definitely want, before we end, I want to go ahead and do the same thing with you, like I've been doing with all the more recent guests, and just kind of get. I mean, we probably have already touched on it earlier, but I want to get what in your mind would be the best piece of advice that you could pass along to either current or aspiring falconers, and just whatever sentiment you think would benefit people to hear before we call this good. Yeah,
well, I've done a number of presentations now on imprints in particular because I fly everything, but that's my gift, I guess, more than anything. I'm better at that. But all right, the most important thing in flying falcons, and it probably applies to short wings too, and that is learning where what I call the second day high is. Doug Bush and I chatted this out and came up with this, and one time we were sitting around sorting stuff out. And what a second day high is, all right, is the problem is you got people say, my bird will fly between 900 grams and 970 grams, or 960 grams, 2 ounces, basically. Well, that's just bunk, all right? No bird has that latitude to perform like they're truly capable. That doesn't mean they don't go and catch something. So what's most important to understand is to find out where the second day high is, all right? I'll give it a simple layout. Let's say you have a competent game hawk. All right, you're out flying, and we'll use a simple number like 900 grams, okay? And so the bird's flying at 900 grams. You go out, the bird flies fairly good. You think it could fly better, but it was a good flight, and it killed a duck, and you fed it. Its rate came up a bit the next day, and you fly the next day, and the bird flies really, really good. And you're thinking, wow, that's really good. And then you fed a bit, and the next day, you feed it up. It might be just, 5 grams more, whatever. And you fly it, and the bird goes up really nice, but doesn't finish like it should be capable of. It's what I call making the game look better than it is, okay? The bird stooped. It might have caught it, but it didn't do it right. It might have remounted 2 times, finally caught it, whatever, but it didn't do it quite right. And you knew the bird was capable of it. And you think, well, obviously my new fly weight is this one that was in the middle. It was pretty good. Well, you go there, and what happens is you fly it that weight. The body fly is really great. You fly it there. The next day it's a little high, fly it again, and it doesn't fly as proficiently as it should and all that. You found what is a second day high. You go back to where they fly their best. You have 1 day of grace. They'll be high. And they'll fly good, and they'll be successful, maybe even dramatically. And then on the next day, you're still on the climb because you want to fly the most on the climb you can. And next thing you know, it misfoots it or curves it the wrong way. It doesn't do an inside cut, and it always does. Whatever the nuances are. If you have a bird that's good enough to find this, then you'll know the nuances. That second day high is your marker. And now it's hard to find that every year with every bird. I have to find where that is every year. It's different. And as the season goes on, it can change slightly, but not dramatically. And so there is no point where a bird can fly up or down 30 to 60 grams. That's a people problem, not a bird problem. Because when birds are at their, as my friend Fred and I said, it really doesn't matter what their weight is, as long as it's the perfect weight. And if you find where the second day high is, now you can move back a bit and you can fly more successfully because you're nudging the second day high, and I got to feed light today if I'm going to feed tomorrow because he'll be at his second day high. And if you keep going higher, you'll catch something, and that's where people go wrong. When you have birds at too high a weight, like my gerfalcon Danny in the beginning, he wasn't as consistent as I thought he should be, and he wasn't, because I could fly him at 38 3/4 and catch enough game to think, well, that's wrong. I was wrong, and I admit that. But it took me a fair amount of time to come to that realization. And I tell you what, I'm all about dialing in and having it the right weight. Simple as that. I weigh my birds twice a day. I get up in the morning, I go out. I fly early mornings in September into October because that beats the heat, right? Then come October, I start going to early afternoons and hunting the afternoons. And, I still weigh in the morning and weigh in the afternoons. And whether I'm flying morning or afternoon, I look at the afternoon weight and I adjust so it's right in the next morning. And that's not rocket science. You can figure out how much weight your bird loses per hour, basically, and get pretty darn close every day if you do that. And if you do that, you'll be dialed in all the time. So learning where that second day high is, to me, is the most important thing. Like if I do a presentation on imprints or whatever, I end with that because that's the last thing I want them to remember because they'll forget most of everything else. Most people don't listen. They're looking for validation, not for new ideas, And that's something I do nowadays. People ask me questions. I say, well, what do you want? Do you want me to give you a feel-good answer, or do you want to actually hear what I actually think you might not like? Which do you want, And,
yeah.
Because actually, as it turns out, over the years, I found most people just want validation for what they're doing. And
sure.
That's fine. I'm not going to give it. Not if it's wrong. I won't do it.
For sure.
My favorite line now is, really hasn't been my experience. That's the best answer. I don't want to give an answer. Yeah. So, but that's what I believe with. I think that is just so, it's fundamental and probably number one important. And once you're hawking, you can't find that readily if you're just kiting and stuff like that. I mean, because birds will kite at a much higher weight than they hawk at because it's so entrenched.
Sure.
So it's different. Hawking every day. If you're only going to hawk 3 days a week, forget what I just said. You're going to have to come up with some other device. When I can't fly, I make mistakes feeding my hawks. Simple as that. I'll overfeed, or I seldom ever underfeed. I've done that once or twice in my life, but generally speaking, I make a mistake. The birds are heavy, so I want to fly every day just because when they're flying, it's so much easier to keep their weight, and they'll balance their own weight. If you're flying and killing every day, they'll eat maybe a little more food than they should, but the next day they metabolized back to nature. They metabolize to hunt morning and afternoons. That's what they do. Even like when I was talking about Jack, morning and afternoons, they're metabolizing to know that because that's in their niche. They're crepuscular by nature. They hunt mornings and evenings mostly and opportunistically otherwise. So they're metabolizing to be ready at those times. So you can have I always thought I was really good at managing weight. What it was is I was really good at flying my birds every day. Not so good at managing the weight. The birds did that. Yeah, I just was close, and they metabolized to be ready, close enough. So anyway, knowing where that second day high is just lets you focus and be so much more accurate and keep them right where they're at peak flying. And if you're going to fly hard, 2-3 times a day, it kind of is good to observe the Sabbath one day a week whenever you want. Give the bird a break.
Yeah, I mean, you'll sometimes you'll just damn near fly him to death.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that, and I don't do that, but I have seen that. I have everything down pat. I don't make those mistakes. Like at a meet, I've seen people fly their birds so hard, by day 3 of the meet, their birds are done. And that's a mistake. You get out in the morning, you go fly, done by 10:30, come back, lounge around all day, visit, pack up at 3 o'clock and go out for another 2 hours and be done then. And, if you do that, because you can fly 5 times a day, but your bird has to already be in that kind of condition. And most of the meets in this country are early in the year because of weather. No one's birds is a ruler in that kind of condition. Mine are in great condition, but not that good. That only comes after huge work. Say December. Yeah. Where you could do something like that. Like when we had that day I told you about when the guy from Britain was out and we whacked him and stacked him. And all great flights, not a bad flight in the day, not one. But that was well into the season. And we've been flying really hard that fall. It's a perfect fall. Sometimes you just can't do it. Yeah. So yeah, it's cool. Short wingers, I grew up flying short wings first, mostly, probably about 7 years of short wings. Then I did my stint in Vietnam, came back and started with the Falcons, and that was that. But, short wings, I like short. I just had an imprint goshawk. I guess he's about 5 now, 2 seasons. I couldn't catch enough Huns with him for me to make him the hawk that he was capable of being. He's a great bird, best exhibitor I ever had. And male flew at 825 grams and was a big bird. And anyway, I gave him back to the original breeder for him to use for breeding because I thought I could do it, but my circumstances are really facilitate big falcons more than exhibitors. So as much as I wanted to do it, and the bird was awesome, and we'd caught 20. I mean, the 20 is not enough birds to make a bird fly like it's capable. I don't care what bird you have, what you're flying.
Yeah.
You can catch 20 of anything by sheer luck, if nothing. But, and maybe that's what I had that year. I don't know. But
if you fly enough. Yeah. If you fly enough. Yeah. But yeah. Well, I mean, it's been an awesome talk, Dale. I really appreciate you taking the time and everything. I wish we had, like I said, hopefully there'll be a time where we can do another one of these. And I mean, you've been, very gracious and sharing all these, different stories and experiences. And it's been a pleasure actually getting a chance to talk to you and get to know you a little bit in person. And well, unfortunately not quite in person, the next best thing here, but
yeah, I actually like this. Yeah, it's good. Well, anyway, you have a great day and thanks for the call. It was fun. I had a nice time.
For sure. Yeah. Hang on here for just a couple minutes after I hit stop and we'll talk just a smidge more, but yes, thank you again so much. And, I greatly appreciate it. Like I said, hopefully next time we'll be in person that we get a chance to do this.
That'd be cool. I'd like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, we'll try and shoot for it. Like I said, I appreciate you.